taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. It's April 20th, 2019, 420. That day must have significance for somebody. Can't put my finger on who that might be. Anyway, it's April 20th. This is the Saturday edition of the show, the first show on our new summer schedule. So we've had to change it up a bit due to uncontrollable scheduling things in our own lives, but we are still bringing you 2 podcasts per week, one on Saturday morning at ass o'clock in the morning in America, but at a more reasonable time in Europe, and then on Wednesday evenings at a more reasonable time in America, and ass o'clock in the morning in Europe. So hopefully between those two, there's a lot of you will be able to join us live on those 2 days. So welcome this morning. Those of you who are watching live, might be a slower start because of the new schedule and the early time, but we're glad to see those of you who are here, those of you who are already talking in the chat, and of course those of you listening after the fact, we appreciate you as well. I'm here as always with Cybsidian. How you doing this morning, sir?
Well, it's really early, and I hate early things, so yeah, but it's actually good because I'm excited to typically get a little bit more of the European audience, and then of course with the Wednesday show we should have a little bit more accessibility there. So
yeah,
it's the summer schedule. It's we're still not full time, so we're getting pretty close, but we're still not full time. So unfortunately, we have to pay bills, and I have to pay for coolant systems and hardware upgrades, and at some point I need to get a face too. So that's
not. I mean, down the road eventually. That's a down the road back burner priority. We don't mind freaking people out with your bare circuitry. If you're listening live this morning, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough, and it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. If you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, Spotify, SoundCloud, or iTunes, we're glad you're here as well. We appreciate the likes and follows. It does take us a day or two to get the podcast up to the audio platforms, so if you want the latest info sooner, we encourage you to hit the link in the description to subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. In addition to the podcast, you'll find lots of other fun and informative content there as well. Hello to everybody who's talking in the chat. Bluntman, Notional. Apparently the weather is amazing in Copenhagen. That's great to hear. Great Dirham by Kasododecahedron III. I am never saying that again, but welcome. Agent Ghost, HTK Gaming, Dancing on the Ashes, Dark Hollow, Trikiran. Great to see all of you, and hopefully more people will trickle in. It's always a slower start as far as the live audience when we change schedules like this, but lots of great news to discuss today regardless. So we've talked over the past few weeks about Sony's increasing censorship internally, their internal censorship of certain, mostly adult content in games, not even adult content, but any kind of sexual content or nudity at all. So we're going to be discussing that today. They don't really seem to have a clear idea of what their standards are, and they
have a clear idea. It's just the developers who are being fed these rules don't have a clear idea, and it's also funny to note that this isn't really one of the good news bits, but the only good news this is for is basically Xbox and the myriad of prudes out there.
This is that's good news for the competition, basically. Yeah. So we might as well just start with that topic. So we're also going to talk about EA and DICE and how DICE is being punished for EA's failure right now, and we're also going to talk about the Kotaku article this week about Super Smash Brothers and what exactly Kotaku thinks news is. So we'll be all of that and more coming your way this hour and a bit about gaming news on a beautiful Saturday morning. So definitely stick around for all that. So Sony, So yes, as Saib said, so they do have this internal set of rules and guidelines about adult content, which is bizarre. Sony, it's not. I mean, this is Sony we're talking about. It's not like Nintendo that's been aimed at a general family audience or aimed at kids for the duration of their existence. We're talking about the PlayStation, which has had, of course, family friendly games on it, but also very adult games, and so the fact that they're now coming down with these sort of internal censorship rules as far as what their developers are allowed to put into games is kind of bizarre, and we have to wonder if this is at all a good business move. And it does seem to mostly be affecting Japanese games. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly Japanese games, which is, it's a big impact. So there are many games that are released to the PlayStation in Japan that are never released anywhere else. These are a long list of like visual novel types, some very simplistic type games that feature a fair amount of like splash art or character art or profiles and what have you. Sometimes it involves 3D models. Sometimes it's mostly artwork, that kind of stuff. There's a whole subculture of like sub gaming culture of mini games that they sell like anywhere between 10 and 100,000 copies, right? It's not the these aren't games that get on any chart anywhere, but the games that have been being produced and have been made for decades almost over there, and the market has always kind of more or less demanded them ever since like some of the earliest versions that showed up on the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. It's just naturally what their culture appreciates and looks for. And so that's the biggest people that are being hit right now. Is that there's a quote from one of the devs that they would complete a build, send it over to Sony to get okayed as far as like censorship and all that stuff goes. Then the censor would send it back saying, no, you need to edit this, without any clear direction on what exactly they needed to edit. No indication as to which pieces of art it was. No indication as to what was going on. Then they would send, a few weeks later, they would send another build that had mostly to do with like hardware fixes. And they would get okayed, and then they send another build, a little bit after that. But for some reason, their previous art that had been okayed was suddenly flagged again. And again, no indication as to which exact images this was, but it appeared that since the last time they had sent it in, it had gotten flagged for censorship on nothing that was new. So this is causing the developers to pull out their hair, because every time this happens, they have to send this stuff back to the artist. And in some of these cases, like there's some image samples that I was looking at, and it's like girl in bikini, pretty normal girl in bikini shot, bending over at a little bit of an angle. Nothing like I see worse on magazine covers, in the gas station. And now with their censorship, it's like, lens flare covers up pretty much, 85% of the picture. Not 85% of the girl, 85% of the entire picture.
But what else can you do? I mean, yeah.
At this point, I'm like, well, what are the fans of this stuff? The fans are buying this for a particular reason. They want to see cute girls. It's like, what happens to that? So, and what's happening is that a lot of these game developers are already having impacted sales. Some of the games that have come out under these new censorship rules have been pretty negatively received, in that it feels like suddenly they're, what they used to get is suddenly covered with a wet blanket. And this is causing a lot of frustration amongst the community. This is causing a lot of frustration, especially amongst the developers. And again, a lot of this stuff doesn't hit North America. A lot of this stuff doesn't hit Europe, unless you're like a Supremo collector and you have a region unlocked PS5 to play it on, and you can speak Japanese or read Japanese. It's really kind of like not, it's not really hitting anybody. But this has been causing, and we've been talking about this for a long while, that this is strange and odd. And a couple points were raised, which are valid points. Again, we've talked about how censorship doesn't work, and I'm going to go into a little bit of that just in retrospect to some news that's been out recently. But one of the key things to this is that Sony seems to have rules that don't make sense. So they don't like characters who are stated to be 18 in bikinis on a beach in a still photograph. But they'll highlight as the center to their entire E3 showcase two under 18 to 16-year-old-ish girls making out in a dance floor in the middle of a room and getting handsy. It's like, okay, as far as sexual content goes, which one of those is worse? I mean, if it's sexual content, then the girl on the beach, I mean, just running up the beach, I mean, unless you're like, some I was gonna say, like nun or something like that, but I've never known any nuns to like, try and burn that stuff. So I don't think that's an apt example.
It's hard to call that sexual content, really. It's just, okay, it's maybe you've got a woman scantily clad that's going to be titillating for a lot of people, but it's not sexual content.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like imagine showing up to any beach pretty much anywhere in any developed world and just having a big sign saying, you're all, sexually promiscuous or you're all violating, sexual laws or something like that. Like just something like absolutely.
I mean, we don't have to dig down and try to understand it completely, but I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, yeah, two underage girls kissing is going to be arousing, for lack of a better word, for just as many people as a.
There, whereas if you go to any beach and take a random photograph of the area and the people within it, is suddenly that's not, and so like even some of the more like even some of the images that are a little bit more so on that side, I can kind of see why they're wanting to back off of that, but at the same time it just doesn't make sense.
The double standard is apparent, yeah.
Yeah, the double standard is super apparent.
Question though about all of this, like, why is it mostly the content of the Japanese style games that's resulting in more Japanese games getting censored by Sony? Are these standards going to start coming down on American game developers? Like, what's the situation there? Why mostly Japanese games?
So the official stance here by the Sony management, who is now completely American.
As somebody pointed out in the chat, the Dusty Gamer, that their PlayStation headquarters moved to California.
Yeah, and a lot of the senior people who used to be Japanese making these decisions and making these calls were replaced with people from America. Some of them basically got kind of more or less ousted and then replaced. So the new concept is that it's like these are the skeletons in the closet over at Sony, and they're saying, they're getting rid of all of them. They're like going in and they're just kicking everything out because their terms is that, oh, well, we don't want people to look at anything that's primarily meant for Japanese culture because it's now a global marketplace. We don't want anybody to be offended by any of that. It's like, so you're apologizing for culture. I don't know if I'm okay with that. In fact, I'm generally not okay with that at all.
I'm confused because if somebody's offended by games, it used to be if you were offended by something, you just wouldn't buy it or you wouldn't look at it. Like, what is happening? What is happening to the world?
That's a really good question. It's like we go from one level of insanity to another these days with like in the blink of an eye, and nobody can keep up with the insanity that's going on. It's just kind of crazy. And now this is like, we look at there's not a whole lot of American games that make content that's directly similar to this, but we have some big titles on the way that have generalized nudity in them. We have we've got Cyberpunk 2077 that's going to have a lot of nudity in. And so the question now becomes, is Sony just going to start regulating and censoring everything that crosses their path just because they can? Is that going to be the new rule? Is that the new level of how they're going to deal with everything? So it's and it's also, again, it's like we pointed this out on Tuesday or last week, I can't remember when, but the disturbing nature of their censorship is like, you can in the new Mortal Kombat game, you can take a dude wearing basically just a Speedo, and you can dice them up into tiny little bits, extreme graphical detail with the new Mortal Kombat game. But and you could do that to a woman who's heavily clothed, but don't you dare think about doing it to somebody who's wearing a bikini. Like oh my god, that's just
yeah. Isn't that kind of sexist that
wrong.
they're you force the women to cover up, but not the dudes?
Well, it's a little sexist that way because, again, it's like there's tons of topless guys in the new Mortal Kombat game. But what's really concerning is that they're willing to censor a girl running down the beach in a bikini, but they're not willing to censor or put any kind of like parental lock on Mortal Kombat that shows people getting slowly, dismembered whilst they're still alive. And screaming. It's like, what level of, like, what freaking clown world are we living in right now? I don't understand where it's like we're encouraging everybody to go out and buy this game that you can like slowly tear people apart. Just the some of the worst like kill porn. Let's get kill prawn that I've ever seen. It's just like, I mean, it's worse than the Jaws movies. Not the Jaws movies. The what is that? What is that series of movies where they're always getting dismembered in terrible ways? Basically any horror genre from the States. It's like I was always more offended than that than any kind of like basic titillation. It's just, I mean, I know it's like a personal choice, but still, it's like. Okay.
Like if your goal is to protect kids, you're going to cover up the female form in a decidedly non-sexual context, and yet you're going to allow extremely graphic blood and gore. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I've never understood that.
If it's not about protecting kids, then what is it about?
Yeah.
Like, what? And it doesn't even. You move away from that, it doesn't make sense at all.
Now, I've forgotten because my notes have disappeared, but there was a big event that happened recently that oh, right, here it is, of course. So Subverse, which is this game, we have had an interview with their staff. This is the new game that's coming to Steam in this year, early this year. Sorry, early this summer, not early this year. It's already not early this year anymore. It's coming a little bit early this summer. It's supposed to be out in June with their first playable thing. It's kind of interesting how they're doing it. So they're releasing the game in stages. We had an interview with the team. That interview will be up in our next Gaming After Dark episode. Those videos take a fair amount of scripting and editing and some video stuff, so it's always out a little bit later than when we start to produce it, so just bear that in mind. But it's going to be a really good episode. We speak with this fellow here, but I don't want to spoil too much of the interview, but what's really important to note is that this was a company who makes prawn, and they make some very interesting stuff.
And he's not talking about shrimp.
And they got censored from Patreon. They got removed from Patreon because of Patreon needing to signal to certain people in certain communities credit card communities in order to keep money going. That seems to be more or less where this boils down to. That they took action against this studio, kicked them off of Patreon. It was one of the biggest. They were one of the biggest Patreon groups on Patreon. They were pulling in ridiculous amounts of money. So they got kicked off of there, and then they announced this video game that they're working on, and it has gone gangbusters on Kickstarter. It is up to, check the latest amount. It is up to $1.1 million. They have raised a $1,113,000, and they still have 11 days to go. So, and the amount of news around this thing, I mean, this is just this has been storming everywhere. There's tons of articles about it. There's tons of videos popping up about it nonstop. And this isn't this isn't like the, some of the games out there where it's kind of a little spicy, right? But it's not actually that spicy. No. This is full on spice. This is full on like super spice. So
basically, if it was a movie, it would be rated XXX.
Yes, yeah. So here's a point where censorship failed. They tried to censor these people off of platforms, and they came up with a new product, delivered it to or showcased it. They haven't delivered it yet. Showcased it to the public, and they have received more support there, and there's more news there, and there's more people willing to say, hey, I'm installing this just to spit in the face of Patreon for kicking them off, or spitting in the face of censors in general. And this goes from a low number of what was going on with Patreon. They were making a lot of money. They weren't making $1 million a month, to now they're raking in, at the current rate, they're raking in over $1 million a month with the support game is getting. So this is where censorship failed. And I've said this before. If you want to censor something because you don't like it, you as a big company, as a government, as an organization, needs to put in small, sensible rules that have very little censorship to them, and then ignore everything else.
I just wonder why. Like, what was wrong with the way it was before, where you put ratings on games, so people know what they're getting into? If you buy a game rated M or rated adult only, you know what you're getting. Like, you don't pop that game into your machine and then you're surprised because there's blood or nudity. Like,
yeah.
So, and if you were, it's because you don't know how things work.
Well, yeah, and you don't. I mean, and these would be the same people who walk in or go watch a movie. There was some idiot talking recently how he went in and saw an adult rated movie with his mother, I think, by accident. It's like, you don't know how to read ratings. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? But and that's and you but to demand censorship because of this, knowing that, like, you have to be an idiot to think this stuff doesn't work. The more you try and stamp something out, the more it will come back with a vengeance. This has happened universally within human history, with an extremely small number of cases where it's not so. And these cases are absolutely at the utter end of sanity. Some of them are well into insanity. So unless you're willing to butcher, millions and millions of people, then this is just a terrible.
Well, that's usually how it ends up, right? But
yeah, I mean that's exactly how it ends.
This is basic human nature. As soon as you tell somebody that they're not allowed to do something, that's all they want to do. As soon as you try to control somebody's behavior, they immediately want to defy you, whether you're in that position or not. And you try to compel somebody to do something or not do something, the instant gut reaction is screw you.
So
how they think they think this is going to work? Have they never been kids? Have they never had kids? I wasn't allowed to play violent video games when I was a kid. Do you think that stopped me? I knew more about computers than my parents, and I could hide them on the hard drive. And the internet knows more about everything than the small group of minds at these companies who think they can control everything. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that they try this. So a couple of great comments in the chat here. Dark Hollow says Sony's trying to censorship games on their platform will hurt everyone else because devs will compromise their whole game rather than make a censored version for PS4. That's a very good point. I mean, we might get to that point where they're like, just screw it. PlayStation is the lowest common denominator in the industry, and so rather than make multiple versions or risk having to go back and forth with their ridiculous and unclear policies, we'll compromise our vision and make a nice, clean version of the game. And I mean, and as far as personal preference, like I don't like it when games shove sex in my face when I'm just trying to play a video game. Those two aspects of my life I keep separate from one another. But, if you're into that, all power to you. But I'm not going to try and stop some game from existing. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, if I don't like what some developer has put out, I won't play it. It's baffling to me. And then the Dusty Gamer, Sony's logic, sexual content equals bad, violence equals good. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've kind of discussed that. Agent Ghost asks, do you think this will influence console sales significantly when Cyberpunk 2077 comes out? This is a good question. Do you think Sony will try to censor Cyberpunk 2077?
Well, and see, this really hits on the issue that's going to insult, and I've mentioned it before. A lot of these developers are watching this play out, and I speak to almost more Japanese developers than I do English developers, so it's kind of funny. But a lot of them say that if Cyberpunk 2077 comes out and Sony does not force it to be censored for the full frontal nudity that's in that game, yet they're still enforcing and making the smaller developers in Japan censor their content, they say that there would be a full-blown boycott of Sony in Japan.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely, which would be
by a ton of fans, because honor is very, very important in Japan, and they say that this is a very dishonorable move, and that it is spitting in their face. That they say, no, you must do everything we tell you to, and then turning around and doing the exact opposite when it comes to this big company, because they just so happen to be making probably the game of the year.
Yeah, they want to get in on that. They want to get in on that money, but they don't want to. It's a horrible double standard if they go in that direction. But and that's what it is. What do you predict? Is there any way to predict what they're going to do, though? Like, they have only a few options. They could choose not to carry Cyberpunk. They could carry it as is, or they can carry it and basically censor it themselves, because CDPR has basically said, no, we're not making you a censored version. So
they could try and censor it themselves within their own patch, which is illegal in some countries, because you can't. It's like me. It's me selling your product at my store, but I go in, I open the package, and I change the ingredients. It's akin to that in some places. Some places it's not illegal, other places it is, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So they would jump into a giant landfill of stupidity if they tried to censor the game without CDPR's involvement. If they just release it, then they show themselves a hypocrite. And this is the biggest problem with censorship rules, especially what's happening today, is that you never, ever, ever have the same rule being applied equally to everybody. It just doesn't exist.
Well, because a lot of it is subjective.
Yes, of course it's subjective. It's also political in the not political as in like the normal meaning of it. It's also like when somebody's looking at a company and looking at a game and looking at a product, they're going to make a different judgment call if they are a fan of that product or if they're a fan of that genre.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Or if they're not. If they're not a fan of the genre, then they're and this has been replicated in pretty much every test that I can think of, that where you have like somebody who has the ability to have an opinion about something, and that opinion plays into how they make a choice regarding that. So people do this with soft drinks, for crying out loud. Whether they're a Coke fan or whether they're a Pepsi fan, whichever drink they like more, they tend to they'll tend to go out of their way and try and like react with it. It's really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's like there's one test where they had a sign for one of those that had fallen over and people were stepping on it. And it's like, and so people were stepping on this little sign on the street, and they'd set up this little recording, and they found that after watching people pick the sign up and put it back, whether what their favorite drink was, and nobody ever stopped to pick up the sign and to make it so that people weren't walking on it anymore. If it was a product that they didn't enjoy themselves, if they did enjoy it, of course they stopped and picked it up because they have respect for it. And so even when it happens to a soft drink, for crying out loud, it's going to happen when censors are involving themselves into genres and companies that they may or may not like. So it's all over the place. And
yep.
And so that and because it's not being distributed equally, that's the biggest problem. And that's what I think is going to have the majority of the developers just get angry at this and
understandably so. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't like. Look, Japan is entering into a new age when it comes to video games. They're moving into a lot more indie projects. They're embracing a lot more indie projects. They're embracing more than they ever have before, which was always high. And more developers are looking at publishing on Steam because they can't make headway with Sony right now. And more this is becoming the case. And less, it used to be that Sony would send care packages to these developers and talk with them and support them, generally speaking. But more and more, this is not the case. So it
also seems it also just seems like this is being dictated by American standards, which is it's just a big mess, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with games like Cyberpunk 2077. It's a bit of a wait and see game. What are they going to do? The only alternative to censoring it or not censoring it, is to not carry it, which would be basically console suicide for the PS5. So we'll have to, maybe not, I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but it would be a bad business move. So it'll be really interesting to see what they choose to do, whether they choose to actually value what their business is about, which is making money by selling video games, over these arguably very arbitrary standards, and the decision to take the control away from the consumer as to what the consumer wants to see. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. We could talk that to death for the next hour, I'm sure, but we have other topics to get to, so we'll move on here. But we love seeing everybody so active in the live chat, especially so early in America. I know we have a lot of European viewers as well, and it's sort of later. It's mid-afternoon for you, so glad to see everybody here and active in the chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. You can find the link in the description below. It's a place where you can chat with us and other Triple S fans about all the things we love to talk about, and stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. Click the link below to join, and be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. And I want to extend a special welcome to anyone who has discovered us for the first time in this new time slot. Welcome. Say hi if you want to in the chat, and we'll shout you out. If you don't want to do that, if you just want to lurk in the background, that's totally fine too. But we recommend everybody join our Discord community. There's a lot of great conversations that happen there. So, all right.
It's also far easier for me to react to direct questions than it is on Twitter. Twitter, we follow a ton of industry people, hundreds and hundreds of people within the industry, and so it's really hard to catch any time that there's a direct message sent to me from the message is they're open if we follow, but the just the general trying to catch everything is kind of tough to do.
Yeah, you want to talk directly to us, you can do that on Discord as well. You can we watch all the channels, and I believe we have DMs unlocked. I mean, we don't want you guys to go crazy with that, but you're welcome to message.
Yeah,
we haven't had a problem thus far, so let's just put it that way.
My DMs are open on
Discord. We have a great community there. I was just thinking yesterday how proud I am of the community there, that we don't have, we've got a lot of great discussion. We don't have really any toxicity. We haven't had, the only people I've had to ban are just basically outright spam advertisements for, people come in every now and then, and all they do is drop a link to some other Discord server, and we just we get rid of that. But we haven't had to deal with much negativity there, so we're really glad for that. Hopefully it stays that way. All right, so we have a situation with EA and DICE. There's been some information that has just come out recently. DICE, of course, the developer of the Frostbite engine, which has become EA's engine of choice for some reason for everybody, but also DICE, the developers of Battlefield 5, which was mired in some controversy last year when it came out. DICE has also been doing some work on Anthem, if I understand correctly. They've been doing some support work.
Some support work, not any direct work.
They weren't the primary developers. Of course, the primary developers were BioWare Edmonton, but
and main support now is on BioWare Austin.
BioWare, BioWare Edmonton's moved on to other things. So BioWare is the primary developer of Anthem, of course, but DICE did some support work for that as well, so they actually have a stake in it, and that's important for reasons we'll go into right now, actually. So it appears that given the lackluster... actually, here, let's lay some groundwork about how things often work in the industry. So often, when you're hired on at a game company, in a lot of cases, some companies will offer you perhaps a lower than market standard salary, but with the promise of bonuses that will be paid out in response to performance, in response to a game performing well that you worked on, that kind of a thing. And while it's these bonuses are never guaranteed, there's usually wink wink, nudge nudge. We always get our bonuses here, kind of a thing. 7 out of the past 8 years, we've paid out all of our bonuses, or 9 out of the past 10 years, we've got 100% bonuses, that kind of a thing. So these bonuses can be up, 20% or more of a developer's total income. Like when you're talking about sort of your frontline workers who are doing the coding, doing the engineering on the engine, that kind of a thing. So this is a big deal. We're not talking about like $100 Christmas bonus or something. We're talking about a significant portion of an employee's salary. So with the poor performance of Battlefield 5, with the poor performance of Anthem, it looks like DICE's bonuses and some of their jobs are on the line. Why? Well, it appears like they're being punished for EA's mistakes, and I'll let Cybrun go with the details on this, but it's been reported that there are definitely hits to the bonuses that a lot of these devs will be getting this year.
Yeah, it's not. This hasn't been confirmed yet. I reached out to several contacts the last couple hours here. Now, mind you, it's a holiday, so a lot of people are not responding. But I did hear back from more than 2, and this isn't been confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. There is basically Andrew Wilson over at EA BioWare been making it clear that a lot of people are going to get bonuses and whatnot. So this is still a fairly unconfirmed report, but the report is coming in from multiple sources to some other channels and some other people. So it's seeming to lean that at least some people are not receiving the bonuses or some aspects of it, and this is especially bad with DICE. We don't know if this stuff is true for the BioWare offices, but this appears as if this might actually be what's happening over at DICE. If this is the case, DICE made a game that its upper management became very vocal about, a game that we've criticized before for many, many reasons, but the biggest reason being that they just kind of were flippant with the concept of history. When people play a historical shooter, they want a historical shooter. The insulting thing of the whole scenario, the entire scenario, with the Battlefield game, is that they had the ability, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. They had the ability to just say alternate universe. And hell, maybe even go with the concept that this game took place within the Command and Conquer, which is an IP that they own, that they brutalized with a stupid app this year. That they say that they come out and say this is an alternate universe, takes place in the Command and Conquer universe. Do a couple, like 1 or 2 more changes to kind of make that super apparent. And that game would have been received with open arms. Whenever somebody says, "Hey, what's with what's with the English battlefield soldier using a katana?" Like, I don't understand. And
right.
Instead of saying, "Hey, you don't know your history," saying, "Different universe." You get cool new like what? Why is there steampunk replaceable limbs in the game? Oh, alternate universe.
That would clear everything
science,
up too.
Magic, like that's all they would have had to say.
Well, it's because nobody you'll notice nobody complains about this stuff with the Wolfenstein series.
Yeah,
you have levels in there where you literally have Nazi zombies raining from the sky. Mm-hmm. Nobody gives a crap because
nobody's saying
that's
hey,
the
this
genre.
This is historically inaccurate. Here's the other thing that was really insulting to a lot of gamers, to a lot of gamers who actually care about history. There were a lot of really good female fighters in World War II. There was a lot of absolutely brilliant stories. I grew up with reading one of the books of one of these heroes that she had written about her. She wasn't strictly combat, but I was a big fan. I'm a big fan of some of the other stories that came out of World War II, where people were risking their lives, and they took those stories that are actually real, and they, in a lot of ways, they kind of spit in the face, and transferred some of. It's funny, some of this stuff, some of the events that happened, some of the scenarios that they put were done by what are now today is referred to minority groups. Were done by minority groups, but then they transferred those things over to their main, other actors. So it's like they can't even listen to their own rules. They can't even listen to their own propaganda that EA is pumping out for this product. And that's the most insulting thing. I don't know any gamer who's insulted by the what EA accused them of being insulted by. What they were insulted by was the general lack of respect that EA developers, not the grunts, but the high up executives showed towards the fandom, and how they basically just spit in the face. Again, completely avoidable if they just said different universe. That's all they would have had to say. We wanted to add tons and tons of character customization, so we took a look at World War II and we said, here's a what if scenario, and we make a nod to a series that to an entire IP that people have been begging EA to do something with, or over a decade, and that's the Command and Conquer universe. Saying, please give us more Command and Conquer of anything. It's a good brand. It's a good IP. We want to get back to the world. Instead, they're like, no. We're going to give you guys a cell phone game, right? That has absolutely no tactical anything whatsoever.
Yeah. But
and that's all they would have...
If you want to go the route of saying, we're making our game historically accurate, but we're going to tell you guys some really obscure history that you may not have heard. That would be really cool. That would be really awesome. Like, it reminds me of the movie Gladiator, where they actually, in original ideas for the movie, they wanted to have, what's his name, the main character. These gladiators that would get in the ring, they would advertise for products. It's celebrity endorsements. It's the same as today. They would do this. This is something that actually happened in history. But they cut that from the script because they felt audiences would not buy it. They felt that that audiences would think it was unrealistic and that they had made it up for the movie. But learning that, personally, I find that to be fascinating. How similar things were in a lot of ways back then. But yeah, if you wanted to tell obscure stories of World War II heroes that you might not expect, that would be fascinating. But don't make up a bunch of crap and then tell us that it's history.
And that's the thing is this, and I know that there's some issue that you run into some issues because some of the some of the children of these people are still alive. But there's a lot of snipers in World War II that have absolutely amazing stories. There's battles and events that happened that are really worth telling from both sides or from a different perspective, and that it's totally acceptable to do this in the context of a video game. And so of course they run into issues, but with that here and there. But honestly, it's why not just try? Guys, come on, can we not try to do something with this? But the most insulting thing about this is that all of these things that we've laid out, the mistakes that they made, the pointing out the errors that EA has blindly jumped into here, that they've just kind of thrown out and mocked as to being like, all of this stuff going on, causing this frustration. And then they go to the grunts at DICE and say, we're cutting your bonus in half.
Because the game didn't do well.
The idiot at EA who said, if you don't like it, don't buy it, and then basically like gave the finger and left the company, walked with his entire bonus. His entire bonus that I would be willing to bet is pretty much equal to the amount of money that they're taking away from the grunts at EA. Or at DICE. That EA is taking away from the grunts at DICE. So how is that fair? How is it fair that one of the guys who's primarily responsible for this game, that again, all he had to say was different universe. That's all he had to say. Instead, he went on a tirade calling his gamers, no, you don't actually like this game because it's bad, doesn't make sense logically. No, you don't like this game because you're a filthy pig. Yeah. That's why you don't like this game.
It's playing into the narrative.
People are like, no, I don't have a problem with the stuff that you're calling me a pig over. What I have a problem with is you being flippant with history. All he would have had to say was the just change his approach. He walks away with his entire bonus. But there's a lot of people who are, again, using his own standards, who are not, a white male, who are now having their bonuses halved while he does. So again, it's like this concept of them lording over their grand importance and their virtue signaling ability. That's still there. Oh yeah. Yeah, but as long as it profits me is basically what happened here.
Right.
And is what EA is showcasing what they do and how they treat the difference between their executives and the grunts. So if this is true, which again, it has not been confirmed, we have multiple reports reporting on this. There's more reports that are saying things like, the Edmonton BioWare office is going to get, canned and all this other stuff. I'm not believing that stuff. I believe that a lot of that stuff is overblown because after having spoken with a couple of people, it doesn't appear as if that's the case. And they would have heard something by now because a lot of those people are in some pretty higher up position. Anthem was a dud. Was obviously just a complete failure. And there's a big issue going on right now with the fact that their path to patches and updates and their road ahead is not nearly going as well as it was advertised. They had all this content planned for April, and I don't even think half of it's come out. So, it's now April 20th. They've got less than 10 days to get this out, and I don't think it's going to happen. So, yeah, and that Patrick Soderlund is now a CEO at a different company. I would hate to be working at that company. And I'll call it out right now. Patrick is an idiot who could have said different universe, who could have not insulted his entire gaming base because they were being critical as to fair complaints, right? Sure, there was maybe a handful of people who were actual pigs, who were upset because of the piggish, boorish behavior that he was accusing not his entire, but like the vast majority of his player base of being. It's like, yeah, maybe a few, but
right.
not to the extent that they did, and then they just kept on heaping gasoline on the fire.
Well, this kind of ties into our next story, which is the media narrative is that gamers are this toxic, prejudiced community. And of course, I mean, there are, of course, toxic individuals. There are, of course, really dickish individuals amongst us. But the narrative is currently that the entire community is that way, which is just absolutely not true. Mm-hmm. I mean, gamers can't... it completely ignores the facets of the gaming community that are doing amazingly good things, that are doing incredible charity work, that are doing, that are really positive. I was afraid getting into YouTube for the first time. I was afraid of what the community was going to be like, how they were going to treat us, how they were going to react to our content, and I've found that the vast majority of people have been very positive. And like our Discord community, like I said earlier, is incredibly positive, is a great place. Are there toxic people? Absolutely. Were there probably a handful of people who didn't like Battlefield 5, because there's women in it? Yeah, sure. I'm sure there were. Was that the majority of everybody? No, absolutely not. That's a ridiculous assumption. But that's the media narrative about us, and I think I'm personally offended by that, and I think I think most gamers should be. But anyway, we'll get more into that when we go into the Kotaku story in a sec here. But Notional says DICE did this to themselves. Look at their BS launch party. No sympathy here. I'm not familiar with what their launch party was about, and of course, none of this is to suggest that everything is like that DICE had no responsibility. But we are talking more about like the executives versus the frontline coders and artists and things like that. Like if DICE had some decisions at the executive level that, like, this is an important distinction I want to make. Often when we're talking about, when we're criticizing a company for making big decisions, we're not talking about the people who are actually writing the code and drawing the art and like the people that are actually following the directions and doing the best they can to make a great game, but are just kind of following directions and decisions that are made from the executive level above them. There's an important distinction there to be made. And so, again, I'm not are you familiar with the situation with this launch party, Saib?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's like, yeah. It's more of the insanity.
Yeah, I mean, so this is not to suggest that DICE is necessarily completely innocent, but it's more to say, the people who had no responsibility for the decisions that were made that hurt this game are now paying for it, quite literally with their salaries and bonuses, which as I laid out at the beginning, are people often rely on these as can be a huge chunk of their salaries. So, all right, anything more to say on that before we move on?
No, just that the danger of what's happening at DICE is going to get worse here, because if a lot of developers leave the studio because of this, throw up their hands and say, I'm done. You've shackled me in my job. I can't do what you want because what you're demanding there's no possible way anybody could do this. And I'm just done. I've had it. I'm going to a different company. I'm going to go work for whoever. And they take off. If that is the case, and they get a lot of people leaving, then the worst case scenario is that DICE ends up getting closed, and that the especially that one particular studio, and if that happens, then already kind of like EA is kind of they're in the situation now where it's like they really can't afford to lose any more studios. Like, unless they're just going to be making nothing but FIFA and a handful of other games once every 3-4 years, it's like they're really at the end of their production here, because they don't have a lot of studios working for them now. They're kind of already at a minimum that they can function with having large new titles every year, unless they just switch to making just straight up battle royale and sports games.
Well, maybe they should, because they seem to be screwing up everything else.
And maybe that's what they secretly want. Maybe they want to say, all we're going to do is chase trends that are already out there. We're going to create things that kind of take it over, and we're going to make sports games and sell. The average FIFA player pays like 800 to 900, or it's like some stupid. It's like 700 to 1200, I think it was, dollars on that game in microtransaction. The average player.
That's pretty crazy.
Player. That's disgusting, because there's a lot of players who don't pay anything. So just thinking about that boggles my mind. You mean people are lining up a year to spend over $1,000 on character packs? And we talked about how they gave away like $500,000 to a bunch of people, or I can't remember. They gave away a ton of money to these streamers to open up their FIFA packages on stream. They said, here's a couple $100 or $1,000 or whatever it was. Go open it up on stream and showcase all the cool loot that you get. And out of everybody who did it, one person got one top tier card. So after spending a grand total of, and I apologize for not remembering the exact number off the top of my head, but it was a lot of money. It was either at or more than $50,000. One of those two things. At some point, you got to do the math. So if I spent $50,000 on this game, I wouldn't even get a full roster of good characters.
That's insane.
That's what happened. That's what happened with all of these people opening these things up on stream. It's like they opened, and one person got one top tier card. It's like, good.
That's
Lord.
crazy. You'd think they would have thought that through.
Yeah.
Like
you think that they would have done some internal testing on that at the very least, or maybe they did, and then RNG just bit them in the butt. But for whatever reason, they thought, "Hey, this is a good idea."
That would be some pretty insane RNG like that. That's a pretty rare outcome. If they were expecting a lot of top tier cards to come out and only one came out, that's within the realm of possibility, of course, but very, very unlikely, like incredibly so. But it's a bad look anyway. Yeah. All right, you're listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast. We're going to move on to our final topic of the day, which is Kotaku got in some hot water this week because of some accusations against Nintendo that we're going to get into here. So the Persona 5 update for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate came out this week, and this was a very highly anticipated update that brought the main character from Persona 5 into Super Smash Bros. Great game. Used to love playing it with my brother. The not Ultimate, obviously, but earlier versions of it. But there's a theme song that came along with the update, and I don't even know how they found this, because I listened to it and it's difficult to even hear the words. But a Kotaku article came out saying that there's a spoken word section in this song that uses an ableist slur. Starts with an R, and that's all I'm going to say, because
Google censorship.
Google is, they pick up on those words, so we're going to be careful about what words we actually use here. So they're saying this R word, and I'm going to pronounce this very carefully. It kind of sounds like retarget, like as in like retargeting, to shoot at a target. Anyway, they said this is.
It also sounded to me. It sounds like retort.
It could have been retorted. It could have been. There's been a number of explanations of what it could be. What it actually is, like officially in terms of the lyrics, has yet to be revealed. But anyway, so this Kotaku,
it's like a subverse line. Japanese music is really, they do this a lot. They add in some kind of like a miniature rap or something like that in the background of a song, even if it doesn't normally fit into that type of song. And again, and this is where I am going to openly call out the blatant racism of Kotaku. and you might be going, whoa, that's a little.
Well, I should finish.
Much.
Just laying the groundwork here. So this journalist at Kotaku wrote this article. They reached out to Nintendo and they reached out to the Persona 5 people for comment on this, but then they went ahead and published the article before getting any kind of a comment or response back. And then, but the headline of the article blatantly says, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's Persona 5 DLC includes a disability slur. No room for questioning there.
Maybe, but
no room for any uncertainty on it. It just straight up says, and they put their version, what they think that the words say. And I went and listened to this, and it is really hard to even hear the person talking under the music at this part. But basically goes, ready to pick up the pieces, let's go, let's play, R word. I can say it, are you ready? Like, kind of this typical kind of, yeah, let's go, let's play, da-da-da-da-da. Go all in kind of lyrics. Let's go, let's play, R word. It doesn't even make any linguistic sense for this slur word of theirs that they think is there. If that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah. So this is absolute, and Dark Hollow, you're absolutely right in the comments that this is absolutely a clickbait article, and it was called out as such by many people. Some big name, one of the big name voice actors called it out, and I'm going to go a step further, and I will say this to the face of Jason Schreier himself: you have racist people working for you at that company. Like, not the racist people that you accuse other people of being all the time. You have an actual person who has so little understanding and so little respect and so little intelligence when dealing with Japanese culture that it is racist. Not that it borderlines on racist. It is racist, period. And the main reason for this, and this absolutely pisses me off, and sorry, this has been kind of a downer episode, but I want to finish with a really positive story here. So we're gonna do that. But this absolutely pisses me off that a journalist could walk in to another culture that doesn't speak English, can pull up a sub-track of a song and make a distinction without checking that it's using a word that they don't approve of. Okay, first of all, you should know, if you spend more than 5 minutes researching the actual concept, that Japanese have a hard time pronouncing R's and L's. That's just the way that their language works, and it's the same way that dozens of language works when trying to get people who have been raised with one language to try and speak a different language. There's certain words, phrases, and trick-of-the-tongue pronunciations that are very difficult for some people. Same goes for English people when they're learning other languages.
Absolutely.
That's why there's these things called accents.
Yeah.
When you're speaking a different dialect, when you're speaking a different language, your accent will come through based upon your previous or your primary language skill.
Yeah.
The fact that they couldn't look this up and go, maybe we should look at this a little bit more. No, let's run with the article accusing somebody of using a slur word instead of doing 5 minutes of actual background work to look at the sub situation that's going on there, to understand that basic to give people some basic human decency in not assuming that it was an intentional slur. Maybe assuming, let's use Occam's razor for a second and assume that maybe just maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe that it was actually meant to be something else. And maybe there's some similarity, but hey, it's just me, or do words rhyme or sound like other words when used, especially in music and when you're trying to get them out quickly, especially if
and I'm really certain that the artist singing this song doesn't speak English day to day. In fact, I'm pretty sure like Japan's pretty cool in that pretty much everybody in school takes an English course. It's kind of like being in the States and taking a Spanish course. It's like everywhere. In Canada, it's like French. It's like pretty much everybody takes a little bit of French. But the fact that they can't spend 5 minutes to just look at the thing, they put out the story, and then when they fix the story, they don't put the redaction and the change to the article at the top of the article. They put it at the bottom of the article. So you have to read through the entire thing. This is how people destroy other people's lives today.
As if someone's going to read an entire...
Yeah. By making grandiose claims and then sticking with it. And what's really insulting here, and why I call this racist, is because not even for a minute, and they haven't even apologized to the person directly. Oh, I'm sorry, we just accused you of being a pretty bad person. No, it's like they're openly looking for this kind of availability. And to me, it's the height of arrogance, and it's the height of disgusting behavior. Because, like I said, I work with a lot of Japanese developers, a lot of Japanese people. I'm really like the vast majority of their culture, and this is somebody attacking them based on them incorporating things outside of their culture into their culture. The singer didn't have to do this. The singer could have just stuck in some Japanese lyrics if they wanted to. Now, what do you think that's going to do for this person in the future? Imagine if this had gone the other way and they had dragged this person through the coals for a week. It's disgusting.
Absolutely.
Kotaku, you should fire this person. You shouldn't sit back and say, "Oh, yeah, we made a mistake. Here, let's make another article talking about how we made the mistake." So that we have more people click on that. It's clickbait at its worst.
But the person who wrote the article is not the only person to blame. Someone made that approval, and there's some.
Yeah, and we've talked about how Jason Schreier over at Kotaku has done a good job in some of his recent articles. But the other thing that we've talked about is how the overall company is not doing well financially, and they're running into some major issues. And you want to know why? It's because of this. You want to know why that most people think that legacy media is a joke?
Yeah. Well,
it's because of stuff like this.
This is why we put in our title today, Journos hungry for hate. They wanted those rage clicks. They're looking... Like, I made a point of going to listen to this song and hear the lyrics. And honestly, I don't know how they came across this. I don't even know how this is an issue. Like I said, you can barely even hear the words.
This is where I was thinking about this yesterday as I was driving out to do the big family event. You got to ask yourself, if you're hearing dog whistles that you claim that only disgusting, vile people hear, this is a dog whistle to the worst dregs of society, and you're the only person who hears it every single time, maybe you should look in the mirror. I'm just saying it's really odd that we get so much of like, this is so bad, and then years later we find out that person was actually like, I don't want to get too political here, but there's tons of scenarios where people have come out and said, oh yeah, these people are terrible, 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 and then it turns out years later that, oh, actually that person is the primary disgusting POS in the room. It turns out that the person who was making a big fuss about something that they were virtue signaling over, turns out that they're the biggest offender about it. And that's what I mean.
Yep.
If all these dog whistles that you're hearing and you're like, hey, this is this and this is that and that is this, and you constantly come back and scream this from the top of your lungs over and over and over again, but you don't take 5 seconds to actually realize that you're the only one hearing it, maybe either A, maybe it's not a dog whistle and it's your imagination, or B, maybe it is a dog whistle and the only one who hears it is you. Because the only person that in the room that's that thinks that way is you. Disgusting.
Absolutely. And to commemorate this delightful event, by the way, Nintendo has come out and confirmed that this slur is not the word that's being used in the song. Now, they didn't confirm what it actually says, so there's a little confusion there.
Yeah.
But
good on Nintendo. Good job.
Yeah, absolutely. But it just goes to show they are looking for reasons to be angry. They're looking for things to get offended over. This is happening. I won't get into examples. I was going to go into some examples. I'm not going to get into any examples, but we can see this happening everywhere with mainstream media and even in gaming media, which really seems ridiculous. I thought gaming media was supposed to be about games. But to commemorate this event, we're going to have a special feature now that we call Things Kotaku Thinks Are News. I should have had a little music sounder here. Imagine there was some comical music sounder here. Things Kotaku, the top five Kotaku headlines for things that Kotaku thinks are news. I haven't shared these with Saib yet.
So I'm gonna laugh.
All right. Number 5. Bowser is only 4 feet tall, judging by Luigi's penis.
Oh wow!
These are
great article there.
These are actual Kotaku headlines, by the way. I'm not making this up. You can go ahead and Google search these. These are real headlines, all from the past 2 years that I've got pulled up on tabs right now in my browser. Number 4, Stormy Daniels says Donald Trump has a dick like the mushroom character from Mario Kart.
Awesome. I knew about that one.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that one too. Number 3, Resident Evil 7 USB doll finger looks like a burnt penis. I think you're noticing a theme here. Number 2.
I'm starting to notice a theme.
Number 2. Cannot unsee. The Destiny logo is a willy flopping out of a pair of pants. And number 1. Adding penis sizes to historical strategy game introduces some complications. All of this, what does this go to show? Kotaku's reporting is a pile of dicks.
It's funny.
So, Saib, you said you wanted to end today on a positive story, so why don't you do that, and then we'll wrap up.
So, unfortunately, this month, this week here, we lost not entirely, but we lost a good portion of one of the great near 1,000-year-old buildings in the world. This is a World Heritage building. I would definitely say. And it's really sad. It was really unfortunate. And it sucks. It really does. But I do want to call out Assassin's Creed Unity, which was the Assassin's Creed game that put out a few years ago. One of the things that they did is they captured that building in absolutely glorious and very extremely accurate. I think they went and sent a drone up and captured like pretty much the entire building, and then refurbished it a little bit and did some work on it because they added it to the game and you can walk around it. This is why you put reviews in your games, for the ability for your audience to review your game, because now Assassin's Creed Unity has received the opposite of a review bomb. They've been getting positively review bombed because of the burning of Notre Dame and the quality at which they added that building to Assassin's Creed Unity. And tons of people are now replaying the game to get a virtual real tour of the building inside a video game. And this is absolutely brilliant. This is why reviews, this is the strongest case I can make for why reviews are important, for why allowing people to positively review bomb a game is just as important as allowing yourself to be negatively review bombed, because it allows your community to speak directly to you and to their fellow customers. Mm-hmm. I want to give props to Assassin's Creed on the work that they did, especially on what Ubisoft did to get this added into the game and to do it on this level. I really big kudos to them. I'm still somewhat enjoying Division 2. The loot really has me bummed out right now, but I'm really busy with other stuff, so it's fine. However, like, just generally speaking, good job. This is what we want to see. We want to see more of this kind of stuff, and this makes the environment really, really cool. Also, on another note, South Korea's Fair Trade Commission is now started a review of customer regulations when it comes to loot boxes in game. This is reviewing and doing an investigation into both Blizzard and Riot. This is huge news. The complaint is that it's misappropriate conduct, and that it is unfair and aggressive, and that if the complaint is, if they review this, there's a possibility that they might put in new restrictions, that they might tax it heavily, that they may this may open them up to being sued. If they can tie this to gambling behavior in kids, if they can tie this to something like that, it is entirely possible. It is entirely possible that you could form a lawsuit against these companies saying, you got my child addicted to gambling, you now owe me, with treatment and financial losses, and like, they couldn't finish their college work or whatever, do a lawsuit for a couple $1 million, and then have a class action lawsuit of hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people suing them. So this is huge. This at first glance, this is kind of like a, oh, okay, so they're looking into it. No. This is way more than that. This is opening the floodgates to bringing the hammer down on these companies for loot boxes. And they did it to themselves. You always have to remember that when it comes to loot boxes. We support being able to monetize your product. We support being able to monetize your game. We support that general kind of behavior of, hey, let's make some money. It's totally okay. It's totally normal. Totally acceptable. However, when you start to abuse it in children, good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about time. It's about time this started to catch up. So this is, I've got a couple of friends in South Korea. They're saying that this is a big deal. That there's and again, we're not promoting government intervention. Government intervention is usually just going to screw this stuff up. However, again, they did it to themselves, and they only have themselves to blame. And hopefully, the best outcome is that they realize that they've screwed up, that they make an avid point to stop doing this and to stop trying to take advantage of kids, basically. If they can do that, great. Really hope so.
Yeah. Well, we've been predicting this was gonna happen eventually. Not promoting government involvement, but again, we were predicting that this was going to happen. So it's kind of inevitable. Just going back to the Assassin's Creed positive review bombing and that whole thing. Two thoughts about that before we wrap up here today. Number one is I wonder if this is going to be referenced next time. The narrative comes up about gamers being a toxic, negative community. That they would actually do something positive in response to an important world landmark, a building with incredible historical and cultural significance burning, that they would respond positively, kind of give a tribute to that by positively reviewing this game that included a detailed replica of it. I mean, that's a positive thing. I mean, you could argue that positive review bombing is maybe, actually, this was my other point. Like, I wonder if that is going to be caught by Steam's off-topic review filter. or if it only looks for negative things. So, anyway, regardless, a good thing, and yeah, I have to wonder, if it baffles me. They ignore the positive things that come out of the gaming community.
Always
Only focus on the negative in the media narrative. But anyway, that is... We try to be different here. We try to focus on the positive sides of gaming. That is what we're about here. I mean, we will report on the negative stuff, but we definitely always want to talk about the good things as well. We are gamers ourselves. We think the gaming community is great, so there you go. All right, this has been the Augmented Reality Podcast, our first Saturday morning show of this season. Thank you, everybody, for supporting this show, for the great conversation in the chat. Please, before you go, don't forget to slam that like button, and also subscribe for lots more great content. Thank you to our financial supporters, Old Man Manson, and 2 anonymous supporters on Patreon, our channel member, Captain Dammit. And if you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Spotify, we thank you for subscribing and reviewing the show there as well. Don't forget that you can catch the live show on YouTube Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings, and that's American time. It's kind of it's different in Europe, obviously. But yeah, Saturday mornings, 6 a.m. Pacific time, and that is 9 a.m. Eastern time. Having to get used to these new times. And then on Wednesday evenings, we start at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. So that's the new schedule. You can find it on our Discord server if you forget what times we're live. But of course, the archive version goes live very shortly after the live version ends. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ashenity. On behalf of Obsidian, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.